Welcome to SHOWstudio. We're not actually at SHOWstudio, we're live from Central St Martin's in Granary Square, which is absolutely amazing. We're going to be talking about kind of new kids on the block, but also seemingly kind of centre of establishment at the moment, centre of fashion conversation at the moment, which is Vetements. It feels like absolutely everyone has an opinion and something to say, particularly on this show because obviously it's taking part during the couture shows. It's important to say it's not actually a couture show, it's a show of men's and women's wear, but they've been invited a kind of guest member by the Chambre Syndicale de Couture to show, and they are kind of opening couture as well because it's one of the first shows. As I said, everyone seems to have an opinion, so I'm really excited to kind of delve into what my amazing set of panellists think about Demna and Lotta and all of the voices that make up Vetements. So before we kick things off, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Mandi.
My name's Mandi Lennard, and I run a fashion consultancy called Mandi's Basement.
Hi, I'm Anastasiia, and I'm a freelance writer contributing to publications such as Days, DG, Eurofetch and some others.
I'm Katherine Ormerod, I'm editorial director at list.com.
I'm Rosemary Wallin, I teach at St Martin's on FDM, and I'm also a researcher.
I'm Mimma Viglezio, I'm a creative consultant and the editor of Lula magazine.
I'm Fenella Hitchcock, I'm a writer, researcher and a cultural historian.
So big question that I'm going to throw out there, why is everyone obsessed with Vetements? When I say obsessed, I don't necessarily mean obsessed in the terms of like they adore it and love it, but obsessed with talking about it. It feels like I can't go on, Twitter or Instagram or even on kind of the any fashion websites without seeing someone having an opinion. This is the end of fashion, this is the beginning of fashion, this is fashion being revolutionised, all of these different opinions. What about it has captured the imagination of people so much? Someone has to go first.
Because they're disrupting.
How are they disrupting?
Well, they're doing what they want. I must say that you said they were invited. I don't think so. I think they wanted to be in Couture Week.
Well, they said they were going to stage the show in June or July, whatever it was, because they wanted to change their schedule around of how they were working.
And then
I think as soon as they said
the
that,
Chambre Nationale if they could, and they cleverly said yes immediately because they're adding something. So I think they're so on everybody's lips because they're so incredibly successful, really commercially successful, different. They're changing the system, and that's as simple as that.
Is it as simple as they actually just make clothes that people can wear? Because
No.
And I also think it's the context. Like, things have been very bland for a long time. Things have been increasingly commercialised. We've had these conversations time and time again that there's no edge, there's no feeling of renewal, and he does, like, the brand seems to have come with a whole new wave of energy in the same way that we've seen at Gucci, for example. But I think that's why it's been so powerful, simply because no one else was saying that. No one else was saying that's
kind of like no one else was saying anything, really, as well.
I mean, exactly.
It had got very corporate, hadn't it? Fashion had got very corporate, and it became increasingly impossible for young designers to exist, to kind of finance themselves unless you were backed by a big house. So everybody, who loves fashion was really, wanting there to be someone a little bit irreverent who was going to buck the trend and do something different and kind of bring back some of that excitement that there was in the early 90s, when the Antwerp 6 came out. Who he obviously has trained with.
Exactly. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, so he's got that sort of DNA.
Yeah, Vogue, Luke Leach wrote a piece and talked about it, in a kind of post-Margiela world. And do we think that, as much as we're talking about sort of like shaking up the system, there are elements to it where it's not aesthetically particularly new, and I don't even think they would actually really take issue with that. It's very much kind of based on their lives, the people around them, wardrobe staples. Is that also part of the appeal, that relevance? Because there's not that sort of void between you and what you're
he
seeing.
says that he sees it as like product design.
Yeah.
That they're actually thinking about, and I think this is a key point actually, it's just come to me, is that, often fashion doesn't really think about the user. Often fashion doesn't really think about the person at the end that's going to wear the thing. It's kind of a little bit self-referential sometimes, and so maybe that's an important thing, that they're thinking about who the person is that's going to wear it, and they say they want to make things wantable. That it's the hoodie that you want to wear.
I think it's kind of an interesting paradox that they always say that it's like product design, it's just the item, it's just a product. But then I think what makes them appealing to people who even like not inside of fashion, you know, who make jokes about Vetements, where they like don't know who my gel is and stuff. Not that it's a bad thing, but but it's kind of the whole world and the image which goes together with that. There's kind of the idea of a party which everybody wants to be at, and on this certain people can.
No, I really agree with you. I do think there's that thing with talking about being a product designer, like you think of clothing that would then be, you know, a feat of design, you know, amazingly constructed. And I think what they do is it's very interesting silhouette, but I wouldn't say the construction is kind of
but I think it's another plus is that it's very recognizable. So you said they don't do anything new, but in a way they do, because especially if you're in the industry, you now recognize Vetements immediately, and that's what, in 2 years?
I don't mean they don't do anything new. I mean they're very good at tapping into existing things, or, you know, working with something that's old and making it seem relevant.
But that's what the world is all about, I think. That's the interesting thing. That's what it's all about. You know, it's about let's get together, let's do things together. I think competition is dead. I mean, people get together from different brands and then they collaborate with different brands, and that's the way it should be. And why is it so successful? Because it talks to people in a relevant way.
It is interesting. The most successful brands, I think, at the moment are ones that are working in a really, really collaborative way. So Comme des Garçons has always been incredibly, incredibly collaborative, even just like the concept of Dover Street Market. But then if you think of Gucci at the moment, it feels very much like different voices, different people who they're always getting involved, you know, whether it's from a design perspective like Gucci Ghost, or even just from like they've got Vanessa Redgrave doing their Snapchat today, like,
and
so
being
sweet.
in the campaign.
And then, you know, you've got like Harry Neff doing it. It's kind of that conversation is interesting. What's your take on it, Mandi? You haven't said anything so far. I know
I think what they do is really sophisticated, because, you know, they're kind of taking basic pieces, but they're reworking them in a really sophisticated way. So the context of being on Couture Week, even though they're not presenting couture, is quite interesting. And also, how many editors do we know that don't normally go to couture that are probably there right now just because of the couture show? So it's really exciting. But they are doing everything on their terms, and obviously they're so popular that they can afford to, you know, they can get away with it. Like, for example, when a retailer places an order, they put a 30% of the order deposit down, and then when they're ready to deliver, they pay for the whole order. I mean, that's the sort of thing our young designers need desperately.
But that crew have been very good like that. Like Gosha as well has, you know, he's now at the point where he's like putting caps on how much people look.
But I think it's the partnership between Guram and Demna. It's like
Guram, we should say for the sake of obvious, is his brother and the CEO. And it's that partnership is what's making it laser white hot, you know.
Absolutely.
The creative and the commercial working together.
Well, it's always when they get along, including, you know, you were mentioning Gucci, Alessandro and Marco. I mean, when there is real understanding between the two, it works. And they're brothers, so I mean, they could fight.
But what's amazing about this partnership is that Guram isn't like in the back in the office with the calculator. But he's just as involved. He's just as involved with the fashion scene, you know, like he's been over recently and did that talk with Sarah Moa. He's engaging with a lot of the fashion players as much as his brother.
They just did a profile on him in Sunday Times today. Like, there is a... What's your take on it, Fenella? You haven't said anything.
I might be the only person who... I mean, I understand why they're hot. I understand why people like them. I'm still not 100% sold on them. But that said, you know, sitting here now, I'm excited to see it. There's kind of something here that's generating my interest, even if I'm going to go, you know what, this is fucking shit. Which... I might do.
What makes you think that? Because it's interesting that there's kind of a voice of no, it's not for me, because I do think there's always a backlash when you're successful, and some of that backlash has been relevant and justified, you know, to do with their sort of their casting and what have you.
Casting was probably the main issue that I have with it, and I kind of think you've done exceptionally well for yourself in a really short period of time, and, you know, all credit to you. It doesn't have to be for me. But at the same time, you're in this really interesting position, and you say you want to shake things up. You say, you know, you've acknowledged we're making things that, you know, people we know can't necessarily go and access them, but we'd maybe like to make something in the future that they could. So like, come on, like give me a bit of where you're going. I understand they might want to jump through certain hoops to get there.
So do you think it's become too much a part of the system, even though it kind of brands itself as being against the system?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's
100% in favour.
It's a
Balenciaga. Apart from Vetements is totally establishment, isn't it? So.
But then why does that have weight? Because people do, seasoned, successful journalists who can sort of call bullshit on things, still trot that line out when they write about it. They say, it's anti-establishment. It's that. What does that mean?
I think you
can't be a rebel and also work for the establishment.
Not
really.
I mean, you could say you're the Trojan horse. That's about it.
Yeah.
You can also say the journalists can be quite lazy.
Yeah.
I don't mean that as like an offensive thing, but
No.
that's what these guys are now. And in 2 seasons, if people stop liking their things, they'll be gone that quickly.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's so smart that they've secured their financial existence through the collaborations that they've done it in this show, and then it means that if they do go off the boil, they can still continue collaborating and creating collections and redefining.
I spoke on a panel recently with Lotte, and she talked about that. Lotte Valkyria is the stylist. She's very involved. She models in the shows. And she's very much embedded in that whole set because she styles Gosha as well, Gosha Rubczynski, and she kind of joked about that, and she said it again. We did an interview together, and so it's obviously on her mind. She talked about when you're the coolest. She's like, I'm the coolest stylist of the moment. That's what everyone's saying. She's like, I know that's going to change, and she's kind of like to be thinking of that already. I'm aware of that, and it will change when you're that buzzed about. You've got
that aware of it.
But you've got nowhere to go.
But also, I think if you want to make a difference, you have to be inside the establishment. So I have nothing against the fact that he's designing Balenciaga. First of all, Balenciaga is amazing right now, but you can make a difference even better from within. Why? I mean, they are really doing it their own way, and they're showing it. It's not only about the shape of the clothes or the casting, which is probably a bit too wide, but that's a different discussion. But it's from within. I mean, what you've done with Balenciaga in 1 season is already amazing. So I think no problem at all for that. And if he makes money and so he can continue Vetements, even better, So
I think it's more. It's been so quick. It hasn't been like that traditional, like creating the foundations on which you're like, okay, this is the way we're going to operate.
But that's good. It shows that the establishment is finally opening the eyes and seeing something new.
But it could all be gone like that. There must be that feeling.
Yeah, I think there must be that feeling.
I don't think that. I think that that's to stay.
What I really love is the fact that the product is continual. So even though they say this is winter collection or this is pre-collection, it is dropping the whole time. And for me as a customer, that's really keeping me like, this is great.
And plus some of it is, it's expensive, but the t-shirts are accessible, and in that same way that Comme des Garçons
£500 for t-shirts.
No, the t-shirts they're not. They're like £195. I think,
which is like if you look at
a huge amount of money, but it's not like
tell students that's accessible. But I see your point.
And if you look at Comme des Garçons, it's comparable. With like what they do with play and all of their.
I still think you should do some stuff for more accessible because of what we said before. I think that's my only problem.
I think they are going to have that with this show because they're collaborating with so many people. And I know that. The Doc Martin is one of them, so they're not going to be hugely expensive.
Levi's as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's interesting. I do want to go to the show, but I want to talk briefly about this kind of. When people talk about shaking up the show system, they often talk about it in terms of schedule. That seems to be like the way you shake up the show system. But I think this collaborative approach is actually more. And shaking up, it's more innovative, and we saw it already at the men's because when Gosha showed in Pitti, he did 6 collaborations. 5 of them were with Italian brands because obviously he was showing in Florence. So Retro Superfuture did the sunglasses, and there was Fila, Kappa, Sergio Tacchini.
Linda Farrer actually doing the sunglasses
for this, and then he also did Superga, and then they did a Levi's collaboration. So that was 6 collaborations. I keep saying 6 and holding up 5 fingers. 6 collaborations. What do we think of that as a method of working? Like, I think it taps into a lot of interesting themes to do with sort of like. I was even thinking about things like sustainability when I was thinking about that, and working with operation and factories that already exist, and sort of. I think it reminds me a little bit of kind of opening ceremony, and that the way they started when they first sort of worked with all these amazing, quite forgotten brands that did something really, really well. Just what do we think of that as an approach? Because it does feel incredibly
I think
new.
that's exciting. I think that's much more exciting than, you know,
showing
when
2
you
months.
you show. Much more exciting, because you can lift a brand up, another brand, a collaborator up.
And they're really valid collaborations as well. That's what I think there's such like ennui towards collaborations in fashion, because we're so used to like, you know, million press releases every day being like.
But again, what shows that it's relevant is that they call Brioni and they say, can we have one of your suit and cut it up? And Brioni's happy to do it.
Because it's not really
that
collaboration,
shows the fact that
production.
everybody wants to collaborate with them. It shows that...
Brioni are brilliant though. They give a lot of fabrics and support a lot of students.
No, I know, but I mean the fact that everybody accepted it, and I was reading an interview of them saying, we were like, oh, we cannot even ask them, and then everybody jumps on the wagon.
Well, that was my
not only because they're trendy, but also because there's something moving here that it's there.
That was actually my big surprise with Gosha, particularly with the sportswear brands, because anyone, you know, when you work with a massive sportswear company, like if you do something with like Nike or something, there's always this thing about exclusivity, like we would be the only brand, you tweet about us, you say this, there can't be and I was so impressed and kind of confused actually when you saw like a Fila sweater come out and then there was a Kappa thing straight after, because I was like, that was my first thought actually, was like, I can't believe brands have agreed to be in something where there's another brand, because we're so used to
That's the cool part.
And that's definitely when you're saying the boredom of seeing all of these collaborations, it's because the brands have been so in control. They've had all the cards, and now the power play has changed to the creatives, and it's like, of course you don't care about someone doing a collaboration with a big corporate brand, because it's going to be boring.
And it's very surface driven, whereas what's interesting with this is it feels like it's a way of working,
and it goes back to that idea of curation as well.
But it's a business model that someone like Supreme has always done. You know, with their collaborations, you know, they're not going to try and make the Everlast boxing gloves themselves. They're going to go to Everlast to do them.
And do it.
I quite like it as a sort of commentary on the way fashion works on like a level of symbols and brands and the energy which a brand has. So it's kind of interesting how they have Juicy Couture in this show. Like, come on, Juicy Couture is a certain amount of
it's
like symbols and like energy connected.
But it's not like cool.
Yeah, but
it's like
that's the thing. It's like
and
it's sort of like slightly tacky, slightly bad taste. So it goes the whole thing like of good taste, bad taste.
But that's why it's funny, and that's why it's quite, you know, it's light and
it
not
is
so heavy.
I would say though, I was saying to you guys before, we've seen such a big upswing in people looking for these 90s brands on the list, including Von Dutch caps. It feels like they know that this is happening already. You know, that noughties moment is definitely going to have a resurgence, and obviously it will be validated by the fact that this collaboration has happened.
Do you think it is? Sorry, go.
I was going to say that I must admit that, you know, okay, you've seen Gosha with Fila and Fila and Kappa, and those are brands that I really love, just because I'm a bit of an old school type person, but it almost like makes me think, oh well, I'm not going to worry about Kappa and Fila for now. I'll wait till this buzz is gone and then I can go back to it. I'm not really buying it. I mean, I appreciate that.
I've just seen your nails.
I know, they're so good.
Exactly. I was thinking exactly the same.
I appreciate that that's what people are tapping into, and that's what, you know, the millennials all digest as well. But for me,
but I think they're also new to a lot of new people. Like I was speaking, even some of the journalists at the shows, like the younger journalists, didn't know what Sergio Tacchini was. Like they didn't have a clue, and that says so much to different people, because a younger shopper might look at that and completely love just the aesthetic of that logo and the tracksuit and how amazing it is. An older shopper, you know, like
I was having this conversation with a film director recently, and I was saying, why are they making these movies? Oh my god, the original was so good. Why are they even trying to make it again? And every time it's millennials.
Yeah, it's like that Fast Car song at the moment, you know, the cover of Tracy. I'm like, why would you listen to this when you can listen to the original? But then I was like, actually, it's like, kind of good, and I was also like, a young person wouldn't know that.
Well, for me, it's like insulting the original, but exactly because I'm not a millennial. But talking about Sergio Tacchini, I mean, I used to ski in Sergio Tacchini. So it's like, it's really weird, you know. It was completely dead, and it was not even the 90s; it was the 80s. And it's funny. I mean, they're still opening champagne at Sergio Tacchini to be, you know, back.
My
when
favourite thing
someone's
is
so trendy.
I'm obsessed with Mark Leckey, and I love, there's that bit in Fiorucci Made Me Hardcore where it lists all the brands that the casuals wear, and it was like basically every brand that Gosha had collaborated with, and that I find really funny. I know I said that to him, I saw him a couple of days after, actually. I saw him in Paris, not at the Pity thing, and we were just hanging out, and I said that to him, I literally kind of confused, and I don't know if I spoke too fast or something, or that wasn't the reference, but he knows all of that stuff, which is what's amazing. It's like he's interested in he'll know about Italian footballers and the influence that they had on English kind of, terrace culture, all that. He knows all of that, which is what I find interesting, because there are those 13-year-old boys, many of whom modelled in the Gosha show, who are obsessed with him and just see it for a fresh time, but then he's got all this back story.
But even
as well.
someone like Aitor Throop is inspired by the whole terrace scene.
Yeah.
So,
it's fascinating.
But I know it's not going to be popular what I'm going to say, but I have more of a problem with Gosha. I'm not very keen on the whole aesthetic, while I'm completely in love with
what is it that you don't like about the aesthetic?
Sort of everything.
It's just too non-fashion.
Probably
I think
old. I don't really. I get the whole thing.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but
But what's amazing about it is that, Pity, I think we were getting a little bit tired of Pity, and with all these designers,
it revived
with
it
all the
completely.
Designers talking about, we're going to combine our men's and women's shows, and we're going to show here, we're going to show there, and in the middle of it all, Vetements say, we're not going to show in either of them, we're going to show it couture. It's almost like, where is this going?
Yeah.
But actually, without Raf and Gosha and Pity,
couldn't
Pity
agree
wouldn't
more.
have been on radar.
Pity was
even
I
them getting
understand
dressed
that.
up really, really flashy, showing off. That whole look is just, is why I think Gosha is the antidote to that.
Yeah.
I totally agree. It's just I just have a problem with the actual aesthetic. If this was hanging somewhere, I wouldn't really notice.
No.
When I interviewed him, I shouldn't say this because the interview hasn't actually come out yet, but I asked him about how he feels when people accuse him of appropriating a working class culture, because that's obviously been a huge part of the backlash to do with it. And I think what's difficult in a way, because as soon as it's placed in a high fashion context, yes, it is appropriation, but I think to him it's so much of his reality that the kids that he hangs out with, the skateboarders that he draws endless reference from, they actually look like this and they dress like this.
And I think that's what Vetements are saying, because Vetements are very much as in, this is now. Tomorrow, it's yesterday's news, but everything is now, and I think that's what
Gosha's
doing.
Something very different when a skateboarder's doing it.
That's the problem. So it's almost like it's fine when they're designing it. It's just when it's hanging in the shop.
Yeah,
I
think it's also
totally different.
How much of your crowd and your background do you bring into it?
Yeah.
Because if that's you're coming from, you sort of I think with Man and Gosha, they're both sort of creating their own subculture out of this other bits of other subculture. So it's this is sort of my crowd. This is
but
where
fashion
I come
has
from.
always been about cliques, hasn't it? And I think that it's that kind of not intimidation, but it's almost like, oh, that's so cool, I want to be part of that. I think that's actually what drives the wheels of fashion still.
Yeah. Which is what's funny, because the look, I was speaking to a journalist about whether he liked the Viglezio men's show, and he said, I thought it was too harsh. He was like, I don't like fashion that is so we're cool, you're not. It was so lofty. And I do kind of agree with that. I think
that came up really quickly. very nicely done.
It's very kind of we're too cool for you, blah, blah, blah. And I think in a way, I actually kind of find that intriguing, because I think the digital age has made fashion so in your face. Brands are bombarding people with information. To actually see a brand where it's a bit actually you have to come to us is quite interesting.
But why bother even doing fashion if you're not too cool for school or something, I think this is spectacular.
But then I don't think it's the only way to success, because I think Gucci is the opposite. Gucci is so uncynical, it's so unlofty, it's so enthusiastic.
It's probably the coolest thing. What
I
I think about Gucci.
I think he is really cool, but I don't think he's a cool guy.
But
he's kind of nerdy.
But it's fashion. He's telling
but
I didn't know it existed
Mimma,
before
when you go to
seeing
the
it.
shows and every editor is dripping in it, it's not cool.
I love it.
don't
I
like
think
that.
what they do is amazing, but I think it's so different to Vetements, because it's so enthusiastic.
If you go in the street, every kid looks like Gosha, so but except that it costs £1. I'm not trying to make polemic here, but I think there's a fine line between fashion and making fun of me.
Yeah, I was going to ask that actually. The
Please
fashion
don't
clothes
treat that
debate.
out of context, but
there's fashion
there
and
is-
clothes, right?
Yeah.
Those are two things, and the
Yeah.
problem is we had a lot of clothes for a long time,
Yeah.
and now it feels like we've got quite a lot of fashion.
But then people
is
accuse this
exciting.
of being clothes, not fashion.
But
I mean,
they want it to
but
be
is it the
clothes and not
problem?
fashion anyway. They want it to be items.
I'm not talking
Yeah.
about
But I
that
mean,
more.
but I
I'm
mean,
talking
isn't the
about
problem these
costume.
days clothes and fashion? I
No.
think it's anything and everything.
Vetements is fashion.
Yeah.
The thing
For me.
is, they're not easy clothes.
No.
though. That's the difference. So that I
But
think
I'm not
that's
talking
what
about
my-
Vetements.
No, but I
Vetements
mean,
is fashion for me.
I
No, but
definitely agree.
Vetements didn't look too difficult after having Tom Brown come out there for the last few
Tom
seasons.
Brown was the best show I've
was
ever
amazing.
been to.
Oh, yeah.
That
It
men's
was
show, did you see
incredible.
the
Beautiful.
shark.
Beautiful.
There was an
Okay.
amazing bit where the man dressed as a shark like walked to the front of where all the cameras was and then was just like,
That did look incredible, but you know what I mean? We're used to his big square boxy silhouette.
Yeah.
So when the Balenciaga came
Yeah.
out, it was like, oh well, this is all right.
should we talk about the show? I'm very conscious
Why not? Let's have a
of
look.
time.
So now we're seeing
God, it's a
the
big
actual
show.
show.
Great colours.
Can we see it from
Huh? You need to
the
go the
one?
whole way.
Yeah,
We want to see the beginning.
Otherwise, I don't understand. I don't want to
Let's
see
go
this.
from the. So one thing that's also interesting in the context of what we've spoken about is that it took place at I don't know how to pronounce it now, Galerie Lafayette, which is a department, like a shop,
Yeah.
which is very interesting given what we're saying. 'cause
It was the
it
first
was like
It's a department store.
the
Was it?
very
It was
first
a department store. It was
The
funny 'cause
department store.
Britt and I were looking at the pictures before, and it was on Instagram, and she was like, "Oh, that's not Vetements, it's Victoria Beckham." And I was like, "No, it's Vetements. It's because there was like a Victoria Beckham concession right behind it." So it said Victoria Beckham, but it's
Really?
all models. It's like the Instagram on IDs.
But that's
that they
part
put
of
up.
the whole thing.
But it's
you know,
very witty that they're going to be showing in amongst all these
It's
other
very
brands.
Minority Report as well.
because it's
Can you
collaboration.
get up that ID Instagram?
It's like subliminal messages. Like
Exactly.
Minority Report.
It's not by mistake.
No, it's,
All
it's
of that
very,
is
very funny
very well
and
studied.
very clever. And I think they are very, as a group of people, like they are very kind of witty and engaged. They're like normal young people, like they laugh at things. If you go on all their Instagrams, it's very kind of like funny memes and that kind of thing. Yeah, so that one. So Britt was like, no, that's the Victoria Beckham show. It's kind of amazing because it's like just
You
all
can
those
see the whole
clothes
collection
hanging
of
Do
there.
you think
Yeah.
their lawyer has already got
That's
in touch
funny.
with them?
No, she probably loves it. Okay, sorry, Britt. Should we look at the show? So yeah, just going back to we've kind of spoken about this, but for the sake of our viewers, there's a huge amount of collaborations in this show. The Juicy Couture one is obviously getting a huge amount of publicity, but there's also collaborations with Manolo Blahnik, there's Doc Martens, Brioni on the tailoring, oh god, so many,
Linda
I can't
Farrow,
even.
Alpha
Linda Farrow,
Industries.
Alpha Industries. So it's kind of
Dr.
everyone
Martin.
who does.
Oh,
Doc
Comme
Martens.
des Garçons shirt.
Is that one? I
Yeah.
didn't know that. So it's interesting coming back from the menswear. Everyone was saying it's the season of the suits, and it's interesting that these brands that have, you know, everything that's been written about Vetements is always about like the return of the hoodie, and it was interesting at Gosha as well that he opened with 3 suits, and this is very much tailoring, which obviously Balenciaga has been very much about tailoring for them. But I wonder if this is also an attempt to move forward from that idea that they make kind of t-shirts and hoodies.
Is this the first look?
The first look is back
No,
a bit.
this is
It
5.
was number. So the first one is a kind of that oversized Balenciaga aesthetic.
For women's.
Isn't
In
that
this
a
case.
boy?
Well, it's a
Isn't that
men's
boy?
and women's
Men's and
show
women's.
For the
combined.
woman.
Huh?
Oh, was she a girl?
Yeah, she was a girl. I think. You never
Yeah,
know.
she was.
Easier to tell by the shoes, potentially.
Well, I was more interested if it was a man, to
Yeah.
be honest, if it was...
It's really weird because I love, so number 5, that's Paul Hamlin, who like works with them a lot, and I do like that idea of like a collaborative crew, because I think we were talking about how cynical we've become with collaborations, but I also think we've become cynical with this idea of like muses and models and gangs, you know, when people appear in advertising campaigns, particularly if they're kind of, you know, an it model or a celebrity or something, you don't believe it. You're like, well, you've just been paid to be there. You don't actually like that brand. And I think what they've done is kind of take away a bit of that cynicism around this idea of a gang. You know, you're so fashionable to have like Balmain Army, you know, Givenchy gang, like Cavalli girls, you know, all of that idea of like. But I think people just presume, like that's Alban, who's like the PR for Diesel, but he's like best friends with Lotte and stuff. So it's interesting that they.
Oh yeah,
have...
I didn't recognize him.
No, he looks cute, doesn't he?
It is.
He had the extremely long hair when he used to come to Boombox.
He did the last show as well, but that's what's interesting is they just
there
put
we
their
are.
friends and stuff in it.
A little bit of
Finally.
diversity.
What's everyone's take on what we've seen of the collection so far?
I need to see more.
It's hard to see.
I don't understand
really.
if that shirt
The
has
hole in the middle.
a
of the-
hole
Yeah.
or it's open.
No, I think it's just
open.
open.
I think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
open.
A styling thing.
Yeah,
It's very Vetements. I mean,
but it's very, very
I like it.
I think it's actually a bit less aggressive than some of the other ones. It is incredibly wearable. Like
it's the context
softer.
of it being couture week, isn't it? It's almost like if you were doing Vetements at couture week, this is what it would look like.
Yeah, but it's interesting. There've been no slogans, no logos. Like there are coming later.
Are we going to see the collaborations, or we have to find out and understand?
You have to guess.
That's
obviously Levi's.
I think that's Levi's.
That's probably the Levi's
Macintosh to the left.
Yeah.
But I don't see what they did with Levi's there. It's just looks like
Brokeback Mountain.
double
denim,
jeans,
my
double
favourite.
denim. Yeah.
But I think that's the point. Is it's not over designed. You know, like I think.
If they want to use denim in their show, then it's great that they're using Levi's.
Yeah, Levi's. Yeah.
Is that the Carhartt collaboration?
Looks like it, doesn't
Looks
it?
like it, yeah. I do think it's really interesting because that top that they did, you know, the You Fucking Asshole one and all of those, they've been everywhere. Like you can't go on Instagram.
You can buy them already.
Yeah, but this is so removed from
There's
that. Like, there's nothing.
It doesn't look like it's really for a grown-up teenager, right? This is actual, like,
actual
adult clothes.
Yeah. The other company that they've worked with, I can't remember the name of, which is really bad, which is those cowboy boots. And
I
was
like
really
those boots.
Yeah, they're really sweet. And I was reading an
good.
interview with the people, and they were like so excited because they're like based in sort of rural America.
Us? They were like, us? Really?
Yeah, really, really
There's
sweet.
one for you.
Yeah,
There you go.
I can spend a lot of money.
You can spend a lot of money.
I do think it's interesting. I've always had this kind of obsession with brands that have an aesthetic that you can buy into even if you can't actually buy the clothes. I think that's why I always like Medium Kirchhoff, and I like Gucci at the moment. Is that you could be a Gucci girl and not wear any Gucci.
You just buy vintage, right?
Yeah, you buy or you just wear loads of jewellery. You know,
Yeah,
this
you
is
could just
kind
buy
of that
Carhartt.
ilk, which I find it quite interesting.
That's
I really
the first
like
one.
that you can that they manage without any logos and with
Yeah,
obvious things. They manage
wondering
to
if they
still
were going to
sustain the
have
aesthetics and also make it quite, Instagrammable, quite instantly
It's kind of a
recognisable,
relief
which is
after Gosha.
Yeah, to do no logos. But I also think you have to bear in mind, like, their business is so huge now. They have like over 200 stockists. So it's like there will be a huge amount of, I'm sure, logo hoodies and t-shirts in the commercial collection.
But it's clever because they've got this kind of satin element, the bright popping colours as well, which kind of lifts it, doesn't it?
Very 80s postmodern.
And it really high-waisted.
Yeah.
I'm loving it.
You like it?
Oh.
What's your take, Fenella? Because you were cynical before.
I really like it.
Oh, okay, that's good.
I'm willing to
yay.
eat my words, and I never normally am. I've still got the issue with the casting. One person isn't enough thus far. But no, I think it's really wearable. I think it's really gorgeous. I wasn't expecting to say that.
You're like,
That blue dress.
Another two non-white model.
They've managed to
There was
make
an
the
Asian
silhouette
one
a
too.
branded aspect of what they're doing. Like
Yeah.
you can tell just by the
Yeah.
silhouette that this is Vetements,
Yeah.
and that's
Is that
when you've
print or
won.
is that
You
yeah.
don't-
Just be careful about talking at the same time, guys, because it fuddles the mics. Sorry, what were you
I
saying?
was just saying, like, I think that's when you know you've really made it as a designer, because you don't need words on a thing. They can just tell from cut and
That it's
silhouette.
theirs, yeah.
And that's,
Although that middle one could be Gucci.
But that's what's
No,
interesting.
really, the silhouette is
know,
better
I
than
know.
more, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that floral dress is so, and that's Lotta. I like how she puts herself in the show. It's kind of, but I think what's interesting is seeing how it's feeding between Balenciaga and Vetements and the combination, and that it's like it is kind of building. He's building a signature as a designer as well, which I think is something that Alex Wang just did not manage to do when he was at Balenciaga. Like it didn't
I
feel
love
like
these
it
boots.
looked like him
The big
and
boots.
anything
It's going
like
to be
that.
forgotten so quickly between
Yeah.
Nicolas and Demna.
Yeah.
There was something in the middle.
Interesting. That T-shirt says Antwerpen, which is interesting as well, given what we were talking about with some of their influences and the designers that they look to.
But Antwerp is cool.
Yeah, Antwerpen's cool.
that
We
was
all
like
know
in
this.
the first collection that logo wasn't
Yeah.
it sold out so quickly. So
That's
maybe, commercial considerations as well.
Yeah,
particularly considering such like an obvious, touristy T-shirt. You can just get a touristy T-shirt and like.
yeah, but no one does, do they? That's what's
What,
silly.
sorry,
is
what
like,
T-shirt?
I think it's just like a tourist T-shirt, so you could just go to Antwerp and buy one. But that's what's interesting, like with the DHL T-shirts, is they're like probably like £14, but everyone was
Yeah.
wearing them, and it's like that is where they are clever, and that is where my cynicism does creep in slightly, where I'm like, if you like that aesthetic, just go and buy.
Yeah, but then if people buy that, then it's like it's people's fault, right?
Yeah, and also
Yeah,
everyone's
likes
doing it
that
now. Like,
aesthetic.
Can we
It's
see any
ugly,
below yet?
But it's Vetements.
I don't think. Is that the velour? I think that is the velour. Those have juicy written across
That
the
is
bottom.
that is a
They've kept the juicy, and we'll go to the close-ups afterwards.
is that
so
a
you can see
juicy
it.
onesie?
I think it is like a hoodie and tracksuit bottoms, but they're just pulled up really high.
Even by Vetements, I wouldn't buy Juicy.
Everyone will.
It's okay
it's
now.
going to be at the shows. Everyone's going to have
Juicy,
it.
no.
I've been waiting for this moment for 10 years.
It'll never happen to me.
So that red one.
They might reopen their concessions in all the departments.
Yes.
It had Juicy across the bum, that one, which was. It's kind of amazing. There's a lot of more sophisticated stuff. It's interesting they were talking about doing like elevated pieces, because as much as they were saying
It does feel
men's
like
and
that.
women's, it does feel like these, even though we're kind of laughing because it's the Juicy thing, but it is very. It feels more like an attempt at evening.
He's
wear.
already influenced by his work at Balenciaga, I think.
Yeah, I think so, definitely.
Instead of the other way around.
Yeah, it's
I
very
like the pride
elegant.
jumper. That's really great.
So beautiful. And heels are back.
That is a Canada Goose jacket, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Mm.
Oh, wait.
Well spotted.
There's a lot of stuff that doesn't look very Vetements, which I think is partly because of the collaborations. Maybe it feels almost like it's the Vetements world, but it's not Vetements clothes. But it's like they've curated it and brought it into.
I'm still trying to find Doc Martens.
Maybe
You spotted
these
it?
leather things are Doc Martens.
And also, they might not be on the runway because Gosha, the Superga one, wasn't on the runway. It was just it will be in store, but on the runway it was just.
I think that's what's clever about what they're doing, because they're going to interweave through their social media feeds all these other pieces that are going to drop.
Yeah.
And that's kind of keeping the customer base really happy. And that's Canada Goose in the middle there. That's fantastic.
Can you
isn't
imagine
it?
someone wearing that on the front row though?
Yeah.
You'd be like,
It's
sorry,
like-
me and my two mates.
Yeah.
But then the new Balenciaga campaign is just massive red puffer jacket.
Massive.
Yeah. I think we've got the images have got a bit fuddled, but let's just keep going. It's fine.
The other thing that a lot of the stores are doing, they're starting to show the pieces that are about to drop, so that the customers can reserve them. But the
Pre-order.
online, and it almost like highlights the ones that aren't doing that. I
Sorry, say again. I didn't
Matches are
see.
showing all the pieces that are about to arrive.
Oh, really?
I like do that sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's very good because it's almost like you can almost like say, I want it, and put yourself on the list, and then they let you know when it arrives.
It's like a trunk show just before,
Yeah,
online.
Pre-order.
yeah.
Yeah, pre-order.
But it's very, I don't know, I think fashion at the moment is very much a game of eyes peeled. You have to keep your eye the whole time. You can't just think, oh right, it won't be until September, I won't worry about it till then, I've got my person in the store that knows me, I'm safe. It's not like that anymore. You have to really see when this product is
Well, that was
released.
but Yeezy was the ultimate sign of that, because like I was speaking to the Mr. Porter guys when I was at the men's shows, and they actually had to stop selling Yeezy because it was doing so well for them, but it would sell out so quickly that they realised they were pissing off more people than they were pleasing, because they were like, the 100 people who did get the trainers were like absolutely thrilled, but then the like 800 that didn't, like, were really angry and upset. So actually they were like, from a like brand kind of like customer service, like, you know, serving our consumer perspective, this isn't a good call for us. And I think that's
No, but that's why I think
yeah.
there should be
I
a
did was gonna say
system
that,
where
but-
you can reorder. This thing where when it's gone,
No, but they
it's
don't
gone.
want.
They don't want
They don't
to.
want that.
That's what's so
gonna-
interesting,
going
like,
to
Gosha, you
that's the whole
can't-
point of limited edition product.
Yeah.
No, I know. I'm
I
not
know
saying, you know, forever. But when you say the store then is in trouble because it makes 5 people happy and not 1,000 unhappy, maybe a little bit more. But one thing that I think will solve most of this problem is Gucci and Vetements, because sometimes you don't even know what season it is. And so you go in and you find something. It doesn't even have to be the thing, you know. And Alessandro says it beautifully. Why do I buy something that then in 6 months is so last season?
Yeah.
And that's why, and I think they're doing the same thing. They're repeating some shapes, they're repeating some
I have to
colors.
say that it was weird going to the Prada show, because like Prada has always been the thing where it's like everyone looks forward to that show and it feels so relevant and so, like, you know, well designed, and it feels like, you know, fashion, not clothes. But there is something now where it's like started to feel a little bit old, that each season it's like completely different. It's just like that feels so out of step with what all the kind of other very acclaimed, very interesting designers are doing, where it's very much like they have an aesthetic that they develop and move and change and refer back to. And obviously, like, Mrs. Prada does always kind of refer back to her own work, but it's often like, you know, 1995, and then she's doing something. It's not this idea that like each season you kind of grow and develop. It's completely different, and that has started to feel a bit old. And I wonder how that will work in this new retail environment, where things you have to kind of be able to sit things from all different collections quite seamlessly alongside each other.
But because I think that what matters, as you were saying before, it's the Gucci look, the Vetements look. It's not actually what you're wearing and when did you buy it. It's that look that will create the Vetements tribe. And that's what I think makes the whole difference. It liberates us, which is great.
I'm wondering kind of how much of this is a commentary on the fact that I know that Demna, in a few of his interviews, he constantly says that it's too much, we have too much clothes produced, we have too much stuff around. So I don't know, that's the same thing about when you have a look, then you don't have to rebuy it.
I think that's a really good point that you're making.
And also like this, he basically showed like there were these 25 brands already. All I'm doing is just repurposing that. So that means it's and showing next to like Victoria Beckham.
It is a political statement.
It is definitely political, and I think that sustainable aspect of it I do find really, really interesting. Like because it feels looking at this feels more like interesting to me than looking at a lot of other shows where you just sit there and you're like, hey, what is the point? You're like, who is going to wear this? Who is it speaking to? There's like so much stuff, and it was a weird season at the menswear. Everyone was quite jaded, and I think partly it was like Brexit, but I think it's also just like you just sit there and all these models come out and everyone claps and it's like 50 exits that they probably could have done in 6 exits, and then you're like, what is the point of all this stuff? Where's it going to go? Who's going to buy it? Everyone's just buying the handbags or the briefcases anyway, and I don't feel that when I look at this, because it feels like
it gives a bit of credit to the consumer, doesn't it? It's like, actually, you're an intelligent person, you can curate this yourself, you can pick from what you've already got and what we're offering you now. We're giving you some new things,
and also that it's good to buy something that you will wear time and time again, whereas fashion for so long was like special kind of amazing pieces, and it is kind of the Marcus Almeida thing as well, and there's other designers who pursue it, this idea of pieces that like you live in, and I remember like speaking to those guys, they always talk about, they say to us that's luxury, like luxury is not something that you put in a kind of plastic.
I love this close-up. It's been on before.
That's quite a close-up.
It is. It's a bit of a camel toe.
There we are.
Intentionally so.
What does it say on those? It's really annoying, you can't see. I don't know. It's quite sweet.
I think it says Vetements pour femme.
But it reminds me,
like the label inside.
But if you get a suit made and they write all your details and your measurements on like the inside, it kind of looks like one of those.
That's maybe taking couture
elements.
Those boots with a pocket are incredible.
They are.
Yeah,
they're
insane.
my favourite bit.
Yeah, they're really cool. Are you going to buy them in purple?
Probably. Not purple, no.
So we're impressed then. I like that we've got a convert. Are you still a convert, having sat and looked at it for a...
some of it more than
What's your take?
More than others. I mean, like I said to you, I was coming to this and like, come on, give me something that shows me where you're going, like show me that commitment to, you want to start a revolution, then give it to me, and not just... I feel like in the past it's been like meaningless fuck yous. I feel like I said fuck way too many times because my mum was watching this. Sorry, Mum. I mean, this kind of stuff, it kind of feels a little bit incongruous if you have, say, 19 there and then 21.
I like 19. I don't like 21 as much.
I really like 21.
Me
See,
too.
they're hitting 2 people
too.
there.
I would buy it right now.
It's this idea of a wardrobe, isn't it? It is this idea that like you could have that whole collection and you wouldn't need to buy anything out. Like you've got everything you need to wear, and there's so few brands that do that. And that is actually an old kind of couture idea, is catering to this a modern, or a contemporary woman's wardrobe.
If they had the traditional coherency of a show collection, it would just be boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah. That does feel tidy. Going back to what I was saying about Prada, when it's like a theme and they're like, oh, Matisse, and then the whole collection comes out and you're like...
Yeah, and a poem on the seat.
Exactly.
That's how fashion used to be taught. It was the idea of the concept.
Yeah, the inspiration.
And he talks a lot about the fact that he thinks conceptual fashion is kind of pointless.
And I think it's that transparency of them as a brand that is engaging. The fact that they're not just using these other brands to create pieces that they're not the masters at.
Yeah.
They're actually saying it. It's all out there.
I love that hoodie with the shoulder cut off. I love the idea of how many kids are going to start doing that.
Yeah, well, there's so many styling
I'm
things
so
from the
excited about
open
this.
here to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
maybe the point, that you actually could do this with other clothes.
Yeah.
And they love that. But they love that. You know, they were talking about that in the piece
Well, that's-
today that
that's-
Anders wrote in the Sunday Times Style, saying that if they did all the lawsuits for all the
People
copying
cutting their hair.
them, and he argued that Demna actually is inspired by other people. So it
But
works.
that's the really novel thing, because fashion has always copied.
Yeah, the novel
And
thing
so
is that he had
they're
made
just doing it.
They're just
you know,
acknowledging it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So in a
Inspired.
way, they're being they're transparent.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and then that's where the democratic aspect comes in, because you can virtually create these looks yourself.
Yeah.
If you
yeah.
can't afford them, you can go and kind of couple them together.
I sort of regret never buying Juicy Couture before.
I never actually bought
I could
Juicy.
make it
Yeah,
look-
Juicy on the
I could make it look like
I
bad
have
wine
a brown
protected.
Do you? Do you still have it?
I have a brown suit, yes.
You can start
But
wearing
then
it.
Victoria Beckham wore Juicy, so it's quite fitting that her collection
Her
in the
collection's in
background,
the background.
and then it kind of says Juicy on the models.
So big thing I was going to ask is that we talked about how they're shaking up the system, but what would we like to see happen off the back of it? Like, do we want to see more brands thinking more ethically about how they're producing things? Do we want to see more designers like not showing during
You're talking a lot
given-
about ethical. What do you mean about ethical?
I mean, like, I just feel like being more conscious about how things are made. What I like about this is, like, sure, it's still producing new clothing that's very expensive that the world doesn't need, but it feels like there's been time and thought sat into it, like about, you know, how we make things, who we work with, and that is the big thing that I felt at the men's shows. It just felt like there was so little thought, like people just weren't sort of conscious or aware of what they were
I'm
doing.
not
Just
sure
like
that that's
systems
supposed to be an
and churning
ethical
stuff.
thing, though. I think that's actually a kind of byproduct of the way that they work.
Yeah,
I don't
so.
think they go out of their way to think.
No, I
it's
don't.
really
Think, I
ethical.
don't
see
think
the
they're trying to be
ethic
like the
either.
sustainable
Yeah.
leaders or anything. But I think there's an element to that.
I
which
think,
is,
like, definitely, if we consider that there's this idea that you buy into clothes and not in a seasonal feeling that you're like, oh, I bought this, oh, now it's out of style and I have to throw it away and get
Yeah.
something new, there's definitely a sustainable edge to that conversation.
Well, the
Yeah.
idea of buying into a philosophy.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
not just buying a garment, you're buying
Yeah.
into a philosophy, a way of being, a way of
Yeah.
thinking.
yeah.
I think
That's
he and
interesting.
Alessandro are the one who are doing this. The problem is that everybody else is trying to copy, and you know they won't make people change, but there will be probably other people that have the courage to do it differently.
Yeah.
So I think they have changed something in the fashion system, and there's no
they've
return.
definitely played with it.
Yeah. This is so good.
Quite like the sort of subcultural aspect of it. I mean, people have a lot of critique about it in terms of they say it's not inclusive, it's like you're saying you're cooler than someone else, but the idea of sort of the tribe and the group is really empowering for people for young people who can think like, I have a right to determine the way I look. Like,
Yeah.
basically to...
It's giving them the confidence, isn't
Yeah,
it, to,
yeah.
to do it
Thing.
themselves, not just
Yeah.
buy the brand.
I was
Yeah.
about to say, I think like if I was, graduating from, CSM this year and I saw that, I would be really excited about,
Yeah.
what I could potentially do, what I could achieve.
In 2 years as well, that's the big thing, is like if your aesthetic and ideas are strong enough, you can get somewhere so big. So
Yeah.
2 years after like 15 years. of
After
working
15
in-
years, yeah. He's 35 and worked at amazing places.
But still, I think it's really important to have stuff that's giving that to people who are going into industry.
Oh, they
as
got
well.
Martins. Oh yeah, need those.
But that's what's clever about them as well. Just even having that little bit of writing on it, it's like
I know,
everyone
I
knows
know.
a rainbow one. It's like we're all saying it's seasonless, but they are also very clever at doing those bits that you want, and it's like
Better
you kind of
online,
find it,
it's like the modern speak.
But,
Yeah.
but they could do these next season as well.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
thing, isn't
yeah.
it? And it wouldn't be like,
Yeah.
So it's like political
I
commentary.
mean, if you're borderline, you can wear them for 50 years.
exactly.
You know what I mean? It's very clever.
Yeah. Should we give them a
Big.
round of applause?
Yeah.
Big one.